Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we're going to get you guys caught up on all the action this last week. The Ducks came out swinging, winning a couple games, and then losing to the Wild this past weekend, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about all of that. We got some injury news to get you caught up on, some lineup changes, some stuff with the Gulls, and also the All-Star game. We'll talk a little bit about that as it's coming up here in the next week. But we go back to the beginning of the week, Eddie. The Ducks played Tampa Bay. Obviously, being an Eastern Coast team, it's their only visit to Anaheim. And the Ducks ended up pulling out this one 2-1, and they actually did it in overtime, Eddie, for just the second time this season.
Yeah, and it was kind of a defensive game that's been the trend, I guess, over the last week or so with the Ducks, is they haven't been scoring a lot of goals, but they've been able to grind out these 1-goal, 2-1, 3-2, 1-0 type of games. And finally getting one in overtime as well is nice. Obviously, we had the one earlier. Now we finally have two, and the record's starting to look a little bit better than it did before. But it was an all right win by them. I think Tampa Bay played a pretty strong game. The Ducks dominated in the faceoff dot. Finally got a goal on the power play too, which seemed to be the trend throughout the week. The power play is doing a little bit better. And they dominated in the faceoff dot. The only guy who was any bit good for Tampa Bay in the faceoff dot was Brian Boyle, and he was still below 50%. So that was a big key for the Ducks in this game as well. And then obviously Bishop, with the mistake on the Getzlaf goal, helped them out in the second period there to get them back into it. Only about 20 seconds after Filppula had scored, Getzlaf gets the I guess you could say the lucky goal. I mean, I don't know what Bishop was doing. He was going over to complain to the ref, and Getzlaf has an open cage to throw it in, which he actually almost misses, and it hits the post and goes in. So luckily for us, it goes in. And then Raquel getting the goal in overtime, which again, Bishop doesn't even move on. I mean, it was a great shot, to be fair, but Bishop looked a little bit stunned that he was able to get a clean shot off. And I mean, they get the 2 points, which is something we haven't seen too often from them in overtime.
Yeah, it was funny. This game, we talked about this on the show last week about the Ducks on the power play, the issues they had, and then overtime. And here you go. You have Raquel. He kind of solves both problems in the same play, Eddie. He gets not only the winning goal in overtime, but he also scores on the power play. So the Ducks kind of rectify some of that in this game. But this was a good game for the Ducks, like you mentioned. They played very good defensively. They shut out the Lightning on the power play. As I mentioned, the Ducks scored on the power play. They dominated in the face-off circle. The only thing that didn't go in the Ducks' favor this game was shots on goal, Eddie. I mean, the Ducks, only managed 21, but like you said, they were opportunistic and they were able to get the 2 goals and that was all that they needed to win this one.
Yeah, and it's something that I guess we expected to see from them in the early part of the season. We didn't expect them to score a lot of goals and be bad defensively, and now they've switched into this defensive style of play, which has been successful as of late. Obviously, the Minnesota game's kind of an outlier, but there's a lot of things going on in that game that contributed to that. But, I think it's good. I think this is the play we expected them to have. The defense core is the same as last year, so now they're all starting to click. Lindholm's getting back into play. He's playing great as of late. Obviously, Fowler and Vatanen and Bieksa. Everybody seems to be clicking and playing well, which is contributing to this. And obviously, the way Gibson's played over his last month has been unbelievable. He's one of the best goaltenders in the league over the last month, so that's helped. But it's great to see them being able to grind out these close games.
Yeah, and speaking of close games, the Ducks then hosted the Colorado Avalanche, which another close game, another 2-1 type game. And as we noted and talked about here in the month of January, almost all the games have been decided by 1 or 2 goals, and they've been defensive battles. But this game was kind of an interesting one because the first period, the Ducks came out swinging. And, I mean, you really thought that they were going to blow Colorado out of the barn in the first period. I mean, they dominated the possession, the shots. They ran into a good goalie. I mean, Varlamov had a groin injury. Colorado shut him down basically till the All-Star break, they had said. So Picard came in. But, I mean, he played out of his mind in the beginning of the first period. And you thought, okay, well, what's going to happen now? And then you go into the second period, and we had the glass malfunction issue, which that caused about a 45-minute delay in this game. And then the Avalanche came out and scored right after it, made it 1-0, and you thought, okay, kind of role reversal. The Avalanche had been playing better in the second period, but the Ducks were able to get it done in the third, Eddie. They got 2 goals, especially a late goal by Ritchie with just over 2 minutes to go, and the Ducks were able to pull this one out 2-1.
Yeah, and it seemed like Colorado gained momentum from that first period, being able to escape with that with no goals against. I mean, the Ducks had 22 shots. They outshot them 22-3 in the first period. It's something we haven't seen from the Ducks often at all this season. And for them not to get a goal, it seemed to give Colorado some momentum. And like you said, they came out in the second period and they played a lot better, and they were rewarded with a power play goal by Landeskog. And I mean, then there's the delay, like you said, the long delay, which we talked about, and they ended up playing almost a half an hour of hockey in the third period. But yeah, Lindholm gets a power play goal, the second game in a row, so the power play again clicks in this game, and then a nice deft touch by Cachet to get Ritchie, and just a perfect shot really by Ritchie into the top corner, and the Ducks are able to squeeze this one out as well.
Yeah, and for those of you that maybe weren't at the game or you didn't watch or whatnot, the way the delay went down was it was pretty interesting. What had happened is the glass behind the Ducks net had a small crack. It wasn't too bad, but it was right behind the net. So they went to replace it, and they brought out 2 different panels of glass to put on it, and they both didn't fit. So then Phil Hewitt gets on the PA, of course, and he announces that they were going to take the second period intermission basically halfway through the second period, because it was just over 10 minutes. And then they were going to play the third period of 30 minutes. So we're all like, oh, okay, what the heck? We've talked about this before. It's happened a couple times in the NHL, but usually it's, 2 or 3 minutes. This was kind of, a long deal. And what I ended up finding out happened is they didn't have the right size glass to replace that pane. So what they ended up doing is they had to cut another piece and get it up on there, and that's what took it so long. But what they ended up doing is playing that 9 minutes, 48 seconds. Then they dry scraped the ice and finished off the game that way. So that's what happened, and it's just something that happens once in a while. But it helped the Ducks. I mean, I think it kind of slowed down Colorado's momentum. The only real bad thing that came out of this game, Eddie, was Silfverberg got hurt, and we don't know. I mean, he has an upper body injury, but the way he got hit and then landed on the ice, it didn't look good.
No, and if you haven't seen the play, I mean, Zadorov is a big guy, and that's the guy who ended up hitting Silfverberg. But Silfverberg tried to jump around him into the boards, and then Zadorov finishes the check. And the way Silfverberg lands, he actually smacks his head off the ice. And I'm not going to assume any injury. They've only announced that he has an upper body injury, but the way he lands and the way his head hits off the ice, you'd have to assume it's a concussion, which is obviously disappointing at any point of the season for any player. But for the way Silfverberg's been playing lately, and the way that the Cogliano, Kessler, and Silfverberg line has been all season, it's a huge blow to the Ducks. And it could be a shoulder injury, it could be anything, because it is just listed as upper body. But the way his head hit off the ice, that I think is probably the most worrying thing for them right now.
Yeah, and it definitely is troubling, because the Ducks went in to Minnesota on the road, who they had lost to, and that was the only regulation loss the Ducks had in the month of January, and they had to do some lineup juggling, Eddie, which it was kind of weird the way that they went with it. They ended up putting Shaw in Silfverberg's place. They actually did recall Theodore and Trop as well. Trop did not play. Theodore came in for Holzer in this game. We'll talk a little bit about the lineup, but it seemed okay at first. The Ducks, built a lead in that game. They were up 3-1 in the second period. Then they gave up another goal, later in the second, and it ended up being 3-2 going into the third, and everything looked fine. But just like the last game they played against Minnesota, where they had that 5-minute lapse in the second period, well, the 5-minute lapse happened in the beginning of the third period, unfortunately. Minnesota, had a shot ring off the post, and then they scored basically 3 in a row, and the game was done from that point on, Eddie.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting game. We knew Silfverberg wasn't coming in this game, and then early on we had Ritchie go down with injury, we had Cogliano get hurt, we had Gibson get hurt, and luckily for us, Cogliano, he always comes back, so he came back, and Ritchie came back in this game, but unfortunately Gibson who's now listed also with an upper body injury, was out, and Bernier had to come in this game. But the Ducks, they played a good game for about half the hockey game. They were up 3-1 at one point. Perry finally got his goal, other than an empty net goal, so his first goal that wasn't empty netter since December 13th. Fowler got a shorthanded goal. Nason grabbed a goal as well, and they were playing pretty good, rebounding off the early goal by Haula, but a bad defensive play by Vatanen leads to a goal by Zucker, and then the Wild come out in the third period and just stun the Ducks and grab 3 goals in less than 2 minutes. And I mean, we've seen it multiple times this season. I thought it was over. I thought they weren't going to do anything like that again this season. They seemed to kind of fix that issue, but the Wild just came out and they played a couple good minutes of hockey there, and I mean, there's not much you can do. I mean, the Suter goal on Bernier is a little bit disappointing. It's from behind the line. He just bounces it off the pads. The high tip from Haula, I guess there's not really much you can do on that one. Bernier was screened and there wasn't much he could do. And then the Zucker breakaway, again, is a defensive miscue. And it's just disappointing. I mean, they had this game in the bag. All they had to do was close it out. And unfortunately, unlike the other games this week, they weren't able to do it.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in this game, like you talked about. So many players were going in and out of this game on the Ducks. I mean, you saw Richie leave for a little bit. You saw Cogliano leave for a little bit. They both came back. You talked about Bernier and the shot or the goals that he gave up. And, Gibson had to leave towards the end of the first period there with some kind of upper body injury, which, I mean, this is another killer, too. I mean, you lose Silfverberg, who's playing on, the best line the Ducks have. We all know that, the Kessler line. Then you have Gibson, who's been, red hot. Up to this game, the Ducks are 8-1-1 since New Year's Day. It's a big deal, and I think it was unfortunate. I think that, the outcome definitely would have been different if Gibson had played the rest of the way, because just the way he had been doing so far. But just some unfortunate breaks. I just think the defense did, have some issues. Bernier didn't look too sharp. I mean, obviously, he wasn't planned to start, but just a few things that just didn't go the Ducks' way, even though, after 40 minutes, it looked like they might pull out another 1-goal game.
Yeah, and I think one thing you have to point out here, too, and not to really harp on one player and their mistakes in this game, but this was a very difficult game for Sami Vatanen. His mistake led to the second Wild goal. He was a -4 on the night. It was just a poor game from him, and really also a poor game from the Getzlaf, Perry, and Raquel line. They were all -3 in this game, and other than Perry's goal, there wasn't, on the power play, there wasn't much they were doing right in this game. And all 4 of those players played over or near 20 minutes in this game. And when you have your most significant players not playing well and being on the ice for that many goals against you're not going to win any hockey games. And it's disappointing. I mean, you expect those guys to go out there and do well, but the Wild just came out and played a better third period, and the Ducks were the victims of it.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, this hadn't happened in a while. The Ducks had locked down, given up a bunch of goals in a short time period. Even Carlisle called a timeout during that first 5 minutes, and it still couldn't stop the bleeding, so to speak. So unfortunate the way the third period went down. One good thing for the night, though, is if you did go to Honda Center, they did have a watch party. They had the NHL trailer there for the Centennial celebration. If you didn't get a chance to go, it's an awesome experience. Scott Niedermeyer was there. Guy Bear was there. Teemu was there. The Stanley Cup was there. People were taking photos. So, that was one good thing, Eddie. At least fans got to go see all that, watch the game on the big screen inside Honda Center, obviously, because it's been raining off and on almost every other day here in SoCal for the last couple of weeks. But at least the fans got to experience that, despite losing in the third period.
Yeah, from what I saw, it looked pretty cool too. I mean, I saw a lot of pictures of people with the Stanley Cup, and we saw the pictures that the Ducks put out of Timo looking at different parts of the exhibit, and then the cool alumni jersey that he was given too, that a lot of people were talking about as well. It looked like a pretty fun event. I mean, it's always nice for them and to bring an event like that down to Anaheim, and obviously they've been traveling around to every arena for the Centennial season, so it's nice for everybody down there to be able to see something like that, and it sucks that, of course, the watch party ended with a loss, but I'm sure people enjoyed the event and being able to get a picture with the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, from what I heard, from everybody, nothing but positive feedback. So that was a great experience. And if you didn't get to see it, hopefully you'll get to check out the Stanley Cup, some other time. I've been able to see it a couple times, but it is difficult to view it. Usually there's long lines as well, but that experience was good. Like we said, the Ducks didn't finish it well, and it kind of brings up our topics now. Some fan questions we have, and there's some concerns out there too on social media as far as the lineup and what are the Ducks going to do. We just learned right now from Eric Stevens that Gibson may not practice before the Winnipeg game. We don't know exactly yet, but they're planning if he's unable to go. Enroth will be called up. So there's the latest on that as far as your goalie situation. As far as the forward lineup and the defense, we can talk a little bit about both that. Eddie, I guess we'll go with the forwards first. What did you think? Silfverberg out. We don't know if he'll play too in the Winnipeg game. What did you think about Shaw on that line? What did you like, dislike, or how would you change the lineup, going ahead into these last two games before the All-Star break?
I think he played a solid game. I mean, there wasn't much we were expecting from him being on that line. He's obviously not the creative type of player like Silfverberg is. So I think all we kind of really expected from him was just to play a solid game defensively, limited turnovers, play off of Kessler and Cogliano, and I think he did all right. Obviously, that line wasn't as dynamic as they normally are, and you're missing, a big piece of that line when Silfverberg's not in the lineup. But, I mean, I can understand why he was put there. I mean, I don't think they want to split up the Richie Vermette Cachet line. We talked about that last podcast. Tasha asked if that line isn't going to be split up, if they're going to be a line that stays together like Cogliano, Kessler, and Silfverberg. And I guess it seems that way. I mean, we probably would have expected Cachet to go on that line, but now that they've kind of gelled on that, I guess you can call it the third line for the Ducks, I think that's kind of why Shaw was picked. It was either going to be Nason or Shaw. They're both right wings, so I would have expected one of those two. And I guess Shaw had a strong game. We didn't expect him to do anything amazing. So the fact that he didn't play a terrible game, I guess, is a good thing.
Yeah, I feel the same way you did. He played a good amount of time out there. It didn't really help as far as offensively, but he didn't really make too many mistakes defensively. So it's kind of not really a win-win, but he did fine. I agree with you too. I think I would like to see Kasse up there on that line, but as we talked about in the last podcast too, and as you just mentioned, it's kind of difficult when you've got Richie Vermette and Kasse who have been playing well. So I'm wondering what they may do. I'm wondering if they may change Perry and Getzlaf up. I mean, that's another option they could do. They could maybe put Perry on that line and then move somebody with Raquel or Getzlaf, or even drop Raquel on that line. I don't know. There's a few different options they can do to change it up. Like you said, that Perry and Getzlaf didn't do so well the last game. And we've talked about them being split up too as well throughout the season because they've, been off. I mean, they did a little bit better this week. Getzlaf had a goal, even though it was kind of a gift, as you had mentioned, and Perry scored as well. So those are some things I would look to see if maybe they'll change up if Silfverberg can't come back, as if they're not going to put Kasse up on there. Camarosa, any of those guys move them up and switch Cogliano around in his spot. Maybe they break up that other line, Eddie. I mean, that's really the only other option unless they stick with Shaw on that line.
I think they'll probably stick with Shaw on that line. I think what they see from the Getzlaf, Raquel, and Perry line. Obviously, like I said, last game it didn't play out that well for them. They were -3. Other than the power play goal, there wasn't much going on. But I think they want to try and keep the chemistry going. So keeping Vermette, Richie, and Cachet together is good. Keeping Raquel, Getzlaf, and Perry just to build that chemistry and hopefully continue to roll these three lines out every night and build a chemistry closer on and towards the playoffs. So I think they can do that. I'm hoping Silfverberg isn't out long term. They're saying day to day, but if it is a concussion, like we said, you never know how long it could actually take. Obviously, he's not on the road trip with the Ducks, so hopefully when they come back and play Edmonton, we get a better update of where he is in his road to recovery. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think if going into these next two games, they probably keep the lines close to similar. Maybe Nason checks up on the line with Raquel with Cogliano and Kessler, and maybe switching things up there because he did score a goal on against Minnesota. But that fourth line has also looked pretty good, so it'll be interesting to see how they work it. And you've also got Corey Trapp, who was just called up, so he might get a shot to play on that line as well.
Yeah, that's what I want to at least see on the fourth line, and I think a lot of people out there will agree with you and me, Eddie, is that we'd rather see Bull on the bench and see Trop in there. I'd rather him, get a chance to play on that line, and then, like you said, either they'll probably keep Shaw on the second line, or maybe they switch Nason and Shaw around. We'll see how it goes, but that's what I'm looking for in the forward lineup. Obviously, there'll be some more updates as the week progresses before the Winnipeg game, and that can obviously affect this, as you all know. So, with that, kind of look at the defense now. A lot of people were really concerned with Vatanen after that game against the Wild, Eddie. On social media, a lot of fans were upset how he wasn't playing well. And using some other terms and whatnot to describe his play, but to me, it was a bad game. I don't think he's played terrible the whole season, but what's your take as far as the Ducks defense? They seem to be playing pretty well. This last game was kind of an anomaly in this the month of January outside the Philly game.
Yeah, they've been playing pretty well of late. I mean, like you said, last game was kind of an anomaly, and a lot of people got on Vatanen, and I think that's mostly because the clear, obvious giveaway that led to the Wild's second goal, and then you look at the stat line after the game, and he was a -4, and even just looking during the game, he was kind of struggling, but a lot of people are struggling in that game, and you can't really just put it on one player. Vatanen's had an okay season. I mean, if we weren't looking at his previous seasons and his play last year and comparing it to that, you would say he's having a pretty good season. 17 points in 46 games isn't bad. He's a +2. I mean, he's not playing terrible. He's got 11 power play points, which is actually, 11 power play points, which is the same as Fowler. So he's doing well on the power play as well. But I don't know. I mean, I think he's been doing well as of late, and the Ducks defense as a whole has been doing well, but again, with the trade deadline coming up and with all the trade rumors, I mean, his name is thrown in there now, especially with the way he's been struggling over the last game, and a lot of fans are just jumping on somebody, just looking for somebody really to hate, I guess. It's hard to say, but they're looking for somebody to hate so that when they move, it's not a big deal. And, I mean, I don't think he deserves that. I think he's been good, but, I mean, somebody's going to have to eventually move if the Ducks are going to look to make a deal.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. I've talked about trading Vatanen, and that was one of the names that had come up a couple weeks ago as far as the Ducks defense. And I had mentioned that because you have Theodore down there, you have Montour down there, you have other younger guys that can come up. So if the Ducks were, if you were forced to pick somebody out of the group, that's who I would pick. And that's outside of last night's game. I don't even count that. I mean, yeah, he didn't play well, but I mean, as far as my opinion, it was formed a few weeks ago. That's the way I lean. And what's interesting too about that game against Minnesota is the GM for Boston was there, Bob Sweeney. So that's come up, and he's looking for defense, Eddie. So he may be looking at the Ducks or the Wild here for a trade.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking for young defensemen in the league, I mean, this is the game you want to go to, because both of these teams have a boatload of young defensemen and are looking to move one so they don't lose one at the trade deadline. At the expansion draft. So I mean, it's an obvious game for him to attend, and we don't know if he was there looking at Ducks players, if he was there looking at specifically Wild players, or if he was there to take in either team. But it's interesting. I don't know if a trade between the Bruins or the Ducks would really work. But like you said, the Bruins are looking for a defenseman. Every time a defenseman name gets brought up, the Bruins are in the discussion. Shattenkirk's name has been brought up lately by a couple guys at TSN, and the Bruins have been in the mix apparently for him as well. So if the Ducks are looking to move a guy like Vatanen or Theodore or Montour, you can bet you can be certain that the Bruins are going to be looking or be inquiring about the availability of any of those players. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, I'm not too sure what the Bruins would be willing to give up. Obviously, you can think of a couple guys off the top of your head that won't be moving, and that'd be like David Pastrnak, obviously Brad Marchand, and the top players along their team. And other than that, I mean, you look at maybe a guy like Ryan Spooner, but it's just tough for me to think of a deal that really works right now. I guess I'd have to look into it a little bit more. But as for other trades, I mean, there was an article that got released lately, and I think it was the Chicago Times said that the Blackhawks were inquiring about the availability of Thomas Tatar and Gustav Nyquist. So again, these two guys' name pop up, and we've talked about them all during the offseason, a little bit during this season, and on the possibility of them coming to the Ducks. So it's interesting to see their two names pop up again.
Yeah, I think out of the teams that you're mentioning, I think they're all going to be involved. This trade deadline. I definitely think Detroit is still going to be, maybe not as much as we talked about before, because the issues that they had prior to the season haven't been as bad. But they could be ones that would move. We talked about Colorado. Obviously, Boston now in the mix with the appearance of the GM last night, whether it's the Ducks or the Wild, we're not 100% sure. But you've got all those involved. And of course, Chicago's always involved, because they're, in it in the playoffs, it seems like every year. So it's going to be, crazy. I think once the All-Star game's done, the month of February rolls around, the trade deadline's towards the end of the month, you're going to see a lot of things happen. For the Ducks, another little update too. Nate Thompson was practicing with the team this week. He's getting closer to coming back too, so that's going to create some issues for the Ducks as well as far as making a move. They're going to have to send somebody down, whether it's Shaw, Nason. Somebody's going to have to go back down. Likely, hopefully, if the Ducks stay healthy, knock on wood, which has kind of been unfortunately what happened this last 2 games to the Ducks losing some key people, which that may or may not affect things. We hope Gibson is not long term, and same thing with Silfverberg. We just don't have a definitive answer yet, but that too could affect what the Ducks do in this next month, Eddie, as far as doing trades and whatnot. They may try to push back on Detroit again to make a move, because Detroit was looking for a defenseman before. Not sure if they still would do that. But there's a lot of moving parts, basically. And I think that these injuries play a big factor, too, in what the Ducks are going to do in the next, 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if Silfverberg is long-term, I would expect them to push for a forward even more than they are now. But you look at their play as of late, and the goal scoring has kind of been limited lately. And I think that, at least in my opinion, would ramp up their search for a top-line forward or a top 6 forward, and to increase their goal scoring. And I mean, they have the depth. Pierre LeBrun came out and said you can only hoard talent like this for so long. And I mean, they've got the defensemen they have in the lineup right now, plus the guys who aren't in the lineup. You said Montour as well, Jacob Larson, Shea Theodore, and then Fowler, Vatanen, Manson. I mean, you have so many guys that on any other team you would expect Theodore and Montour to start. So eventually, you got to move one of these guys and make your team better. And I think this season, if of any season, has to be the season where they make a trade to improve the offense. And if it happens, I don't know, but I mean, he's right. I mean, you can only hoard these guys for so long. You can only hide them in the minors for so long. I mean, next season we expect Theodore to be up here full time. I mean, we even said that this season, and he's not up here full time. And the way Montour's played in the AHL, and it's only a matter of time before he's up here. And Jacob Larson started the season with the Ducks, and he'll get a shot next year. So, I mean, it's a matter of time before you're gonna have to move someone. If it's at the deadline, then great. Then Ducks get another piece to help them push for a Stanley Cup. Or if it's not then it's most likely at the draft.
Exactly, and then that's what we're going to, keep our eye on for the next couple of weeks. And Eddie, you talk about players down in San Diego. We have a little bit of an update too. Casilla scored a crazy goal this last week. We've kind of seen this before, this lacrosse type goal, and we also have the San Diego announcer Craig Elsten that calls this goal, and he gets really ramped up about this too. So we're going to play that for you for a little bit, and then we'll talk about the play, Eddie.
Dasher for Kozula. Kozula with Gorton at front. Stops, waits, holds. Oh, he put it in! He did it! He did it! The Michigan play! Wow! He put it on his blade! He lifted it up! Lacrosse style! He tucked it in! We're going back to Cali! We're going to Sports Center for the goal of the year! I'll tell you what, they better be showing that on da-da-da-da-da-da. Watch this play. Cali Kozula. He lifts it on his stick, takes it, puts it top shelf. Half the building doesn't know what just happened there. Cali Kozula just performed hockey magic in front of a crowd of 12,920. One of the most spectacular goals you would see in the national, American, Swedish, Russian, British, Kazakhstan. There is no country that would not bow to the greatness of that goal. Unbelievable! Oh, by the way, an 8-game point streak, and the Gulls are going to win it tonight, baby.
I really wish Craig would have got more excited. I mean, God, he was so boring in that goal call. I mean, sheesh. It's just it was a crazy goal. If you didn't get a chance to see it, the Gulls put it up on their Twitter when they beat the San Jose Barracuda 5-1. But I mean, and Craig got a little bit of flack for that, and I met Craig in person. He's a great person, and you know what? I just thought it was hilarious, Eddie. I mean, it was a pretty crazy goal call. I think maybe I should talk to Phil and tell him to ramp it up a little.
In the moment, I can understand why I got so excited, but just some of the sound bites from that are great. The best play in the national American, Russian, Kazakhstan. that was a legendary call there. That was great. I mean, it was just an amazing goal too. It's the first time I've seen that since Granlund scored the same goal in the World Juniors way back. I think it's like almost 5 years ago now. And Ennis actually tried the same thing for the Sabres a couple weeks ago. So I mean, it's great. It's fun to see. I mean, it wasn't an important goal in that game, like you said. They won that game 5-1, but that's got to be goal of the year down in the AHL this season, and it's been great to see how well he's played. I mean, we signed him from St. Cloud, I believe, in the NCAA, and he's come over and he's put up almost a point per game in the AHL this season. So it's great to see him do well, and obviously great to see the Gulls do well this season.
Yeah, I mean that was hilarious. I think we should either start our podcast with dun 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 dun. The sound effects in there too were hilarious. I mean, oh god, that was funny. But no, I mean, like you said, yeah, it's good to see the Gulls doing good, and the players that are coming up. And even though we've been talking about all the injuries on the show that just happened this last week, that's one thing that you got to look at the Ducks and you got to be happy with the organization is the way that they have really developed their minor league players and the system, the draft, and all of that. I mean, we're in a position to make moves, and we've been talking about trades the last, probably 3-4 podcasts now, in the Ducks lineup, and we go over, the options and the things that the Ducks have. And, if you're a Ducks fan, you have to be very happy with this team in the sense that they have a lot of options. I mean, we knew the Ducks were going to have to lean on the Gulls this season. We weren't sure how it was going to pan out. But if you look at it right now, Eddie, and I know we kind of talk about it as a curse, the Ducks are still in first in the Pacific. I mean, it's a tight race. They're only up on a point now. They've got some, critical games, obviously, in the second half of the season. I mean, they're also going to be playing the Oilers here coming up before the All-Star break, which is going to be a really big game. But in terms of organizational depth, and the way that this team is run, from the NHL to the AHL, you've got to be very impressed with the way that management's handled this organization.
It's never a bad thing either to have this type of depth. It's actually a good thing because when you're looking to make a deal, I mean, you have a plethora of defensemen, young defensemen that you're able to use as trade pieces. And obviously it's disappointing to have to eventually lose one of them, but if you have the ability to make a move like that with a quality player, to get a quality player in return and make yourself better, I mean, it's never a bad thing. And obviously, it'll be unfortunate if anybody eventually leaves, whether it's Vatanen or Fowler or Theodore, Montour, Larson. I don't want to speculate about who's leaving and who's not, but if one of them does leave, obviously it's going to be unfortunate, but the player we bring in is going to make this team better. And I think that's the important thing. Whether we see it happen now or at the draft, and it will be for next season, who knows? But I think that's the key thing to think. You look at the depth that the Ducks have here and with the Gulls, it's important that they have that and are able to make a move with it.
Exactly. The depth that the Ducks have in the organization is very, very good. So at least we've got options, despite some of the injuries and things that have happened, this season. And the Ducks, they're going to finish out here. They got 2 more games before the All-Star break. We just found out too that from the Jets coach that Lalline and Stafford aren't going to be in the game tomorrow against Winnipeg. So that may help the Ducks out a little bit, Eddie. And then of course they're going to have the showdown with the Oilers, who have been right on the Ducks behind, so to speak, in this month of January.
Yeah, I mean, Winnipeg's always a tough matchup. I mean, they're a big physical team. They've been playing okay this season. They're playing in a tough division, let's be honest. I mean, you've got the Wild, the Blues, you've got even Colorado. I mean, how bad they've been. You've still got the Stars in that, Nashville. I mean, it's all the Central Division is probably the toughest division in hockey next to the Metro Division. So it's going to be a tough game, and obviously not having Stafford, not having Laine, that's going to be tough for them. That's a big key of their offense, especially with Patrick Laine not being in it. But they've still got some key players. You've got Nikolai Ehlers, who's played good for them this season. Scheifele's played great. You've still got Dustin Byfuglien there, Wheeler as well. So it's going to be a tough game. I think the goaltending has been struggling for them this season. But, we remember from the playoffs playing at Winnipeg. It's a tough environment to play in. So it's going to be an interesting game. It's always fun watching those games in Winnipeg, too. The fans there are nuts, so it's going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I mean, and the Ducks are going to have to, hopefully win these last two because, I mean, you look at the Pacific Division. I mean, it's pretty tight. You've got San Jose fighting it out in there too as well. And even though the Kings are kind of a little bit down the standings, they're still not going away. They've been relying on Budaj. And, even though Kopitar's not quite had the season they expected, they're still in the mix too. So you only have a couple teams, really out of it. Obviously, we've talked about Colorado in the conference. We've talked about it, Arizona being out of it. But you never know with the way that this division can pan out. Any of these teams, I mean, even Calgary, Vancouver have been playing as well. They can jump in there too in the wild card spot. It's going to be a battle for that wild card spot. I just hope that the Ducks finish in the top three. That's my big thing. We've talked about this before, Eddie. They've been in first, the last 4 times. We know what's happened with that. There's no need going over that. But the way that they're playing now, I think that they'll finish, hopefully in that top 3 spot, stay healthy, and, just roll from there into the playoffs.
Yeah, and you look at the standings right now, I mean, it would take a breakdown, I think, from one of these top 3 teams here, being the Ducks, the Oilers, and the Sharks. It would take a breakdown for one of them to really fall out of that top 3. I mean, yes, there is Calgary, Vancouver, and LA chipping at their heels, but they're all kind of down there. We saw the Oilers thrash Calgary 7-3 last night. The Sharks have been playing well lately. The Ducks have been playing well lately, and really, the Kings have been struggling. Other than Jeff Carter, they haven't been able to get much offense going this season. So it really is up to those 3 teams, and this game on Wednesday here is a really big game for the Pacific Division standings, how they are right now, because it is the Ducks and the Oilers up there in the top 2, and the Sharks are up there as well. So it's going to be an important game, and I don't know the last time we've really seen a Ducks and Oilers game be important for the standings. Usually in the last few seasons, it's been a game where, yeah, it's an important 4-point game, but the Oilers are in last place and it doesn't matter. But, they finally started to get things going this season, and I mean, it's going to be a key game for the Ducks. And the way the Oilers are playing right now, it's probably going to be the toughest game of the week.
Yeah, I agree, and that's for sure. And then, after that, the All-Star game will be upon us. I do have a little bit of update. The mascots are going to have some stuff going on before the game. I've got some info. I don't have all of the schedule in front of me at the moment, but I'm going to put out a little bit article on it. I've got some things to compile for you guys, and that way you can look at it and kind of get involved in that. We can kind of pump up Wild Wing for some of the pre-All-Star festivities. And then, of course, on the weekend will be the skills competition, and then the All-Star game with Kessler and Fowler going to that. And Eddie, you want to talk a little bit about the format? I think it's going to be a little bit similar to last All-Star game. Any little changes or updates?
Yeah, it's a little bit similar. I mean, like you said, the All-Star skills competition is on the 28th, which is Saturday, and it's at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. And they're starting it out this year with I guess because it's in LA, they're starting out with an NHL All-Star Celebrity Shootout. We've seen this in the NBA All-Star Game, where they have the celebrity game where Kevin Hart's been there and a couple other celebrities have been there, and they always have that game. And it looks like they're kind of doing the same thing. And the way they've described it here is this is prior to the skills competition. It's at 2:15 Pacific, and it's NHL legends will face celebrities from the world of movies, television, and music in the 2017 NHL All-Star Celebrity Shootout. So that'll be something fun before the skills competition that we can see. It's something different we haven't seen, and it makes sense, I guess, with the All-Star game being in LA. Other than that, they have 6 competitions in the skill competition this season. They've got the relay, which we've seen is a little bit different this year. They have I'm not too sure how the events they have, but it looks like they have one-timers, puck control, stick handling, goalie goals, a couple different things in that one. They've got what they're calling the Honda NHL 4-Line Challenge, and that looks like it's a new event. They're shooting pucks from the near blue line, center line, far blue line, and far goal line, and it's kind of similar to the in between intermission events you see at hockey games where they shoot the puck into the small hole, and that seems to be the style event they're doing for that one. And then the next four are the ones we see pretty much every year. You've got accuracy shooting, fastest skating, hardest shot, and the shootout. So those are the 6 events that they're having for the skills competition. And then it looks like the winner of the skills competition has the ability to set their games and matchups for the All-Star game, which takes place the next day on the 29th. And it says the winners of each semifinal game will face off, and the winner take all again, like last year, gets $1 million, and it's 3-on-3 again. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Obviously, we've got the captains already. Carey Price is captain of the Atlantic, PK's captain of the Central Division, Crosby is the Metro, and Connor McDavid of the Pacific Division. So it'll be fun to watch that, and also to see what events that Kessler and Fowler take place in.
Yeah, it'll be a good weekend. To check out all the events, like you said, that are going on. We'll be posting up, like I mentioned, some things about the schedule and whatnot. In relation to the mascots and some of the All-Star festivities. So check out that. It'll be out in the next couple of days. And we'll try to have a podcast maybe right after the All-Star game with more of our staff. We'll kind of talk about, the whole weekend and maybe just the season in general, as well as take, some fan questions. So with that, we'll be back in a week. Hopefully the Ducks, finish out the January with 2 wins before the All-Star game. And we'll be back to talk about it all. So let's go Ducks.